Hello one more time and welcome. I hope that you see all four of us and that you will enjoy our conversation on SF tools, on SF concepts in different industries, in different fields, in different ways applied, or how Marco says it always with a SF lens. I'm Cristina Mühl. I'm a solution-focused practitioner, I think like everyone here. Each one has their own particular area where they do things in SF. I come, for example, with a huge background when it comes to audit and compliance, and that I truly enjoy it to see through using the SF lens on top of that. We have, I'm going to go how I have you on the screen. So we have Marco Matera, Stefan Hammer, and Alan Kay. And I'm going to let each of them to introduce themselves, and after that we'll continue with the question. So Marco, do you want to start?
Okay, I come from Italy. I'm a solution-focused practitioner. I'm also a trainer. This time I'm more focusing on supervision. And I also develop some tools, and what we share today is one of my tools, and how we can use solution focus as a lens to make better our life. So we will talk about it.
Stephanie?
I'm Stephanie Hammer. I'm a certified design thinking coach and SF practitioner, and I am continually surprised at how meaningful, much more meaningful design thinking is when you apply that SF lens. And I'm going to talk about how I came to use SF in design thinking, especially in prototyping.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Alan?
Excuse me. I've been using solution focus for 20 years in business. I was trained by the experts in the world of family therapy, some significant trainers. And one of the things I'd like to talk about today is the use of solution focus in organizations. It's actually a little bit of what I'm going to be talking about later on in my own session. How do you apply the language of solution focus in organizations to projects, not just doing coaching, etc.
Thank you, everyone. And I think that's a beautiful takeaway right now. You know, just listening to the three of you and looking at saying this is how broad solution focus can be used, and keeping this in mind. There's one question that we thought about: how do we want to interact in this session, and how do we want to make sure that we keep it focusing on what is it that we can learn from each of the three persons in front of us in the panel. And I'm really happy that this got together, because I'm truly excited about the things that I'm learning from Marco, and the things that I'm learning out of Alan, and the beautiful things that I know from Stephanie, because I've seen her already talking about this topic. So I would start by saying the one question that everyone would consider and has on top of their mind for sure is, what difference does it make to use this SF lens on your individual area of interest? So I would start the same way. So Marco, do you want to share with us one example of putting these SF lenses, and what do you see?
Yeah, when I started in 2005, I started as a technique. So I learned techniques. Now, after this many times, what I realized that solution focus is not just technique, it's an approach. Change the way that you look the reality, because during the practice go on, you look the reality from this lens, and now we will continue to discuss that. So the first point is your ability to be more and more curious, and that changed completely life.
I think the curiosity is definitely one of the points that Alan has always kept in mind, and the way I've interacted, or my perception out of Alan from all of the conversation that we had until now, is that exactly that curiosity got him to discover so many things.
Yep. Do you want me to talk?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I come from a business background I was an advertising guy for a long time, famous brands. And I was always curious about how my client's system worked, not just the advertising. So Levi's, how did they get the product out to the retailer? Coca-Cola, how did they distribute it to the bottlers and then to the public, etc. So I often went on trips with the sales teams and the bottling, the delivery trucks, and my boss used to say, what are you doing there? So that, and it helped me actually make better advertising campaigns for them through the creative people, media, etc. So that curiosity remains in I'm always curious with a client as an organization, how the organizations work, but only from the extent of being able to ask them questions about how can we use what you already know, etc., as a solution-focused approach, even better. So I think curiosity, right from the beginning, has to extend right through the project. And I do work with things like strategic planning. The one I was doing this morning for an organization is strategic planning, but we were doing stakeholder consultation. Just curiosity. I heard you mentioning, and you take it from there in a very solution-focused way.
And I think you said curiosity, and then you said, I heard you mentioning. Yeah. I can say the same thing. I heard Stefan mentioning design thinking, because I think that's another way of being curious of how things can be put together, because that's another thing, this beautiful thing of a prototype. Now let Stefanie tell us a bit about this curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity is certainly something that fits really well into the belief that every situation is different also in design thinking. So you come in and you address a problem in design thinking and really have this very similar mindset to SF as, hey, I know nothing about the situation and I can do my best work without having preconceived notions, but by actually listening to what's going on, listening to my customers, and really being curious about what they say.
Yeah, and curiosity also open not only the mind, but open the border. When we open the border with the curiosity, we meet the other in a very different way. I spend many time in training association, and there is closed border because everyone looking to the border like it's mine. In solution-focused approach, in solution-focused community, everything was sharing this moment. And this is coming from the curiosity. When I met Cristina, we was curious each other about what we are, and we developed a workshop we do before. And also with Gianluca, when we start our work, we started the curiosity. How do you think about that? Wow, you don't say with the exclamation point, always with the interrogation point. And that makes collaboration. So for me, it's curiosity and collaboration, because cooperation is better than competition.
And I think definitely this entire conference was generated by curiosity, if this thing will actually be working, and there we are. So I really love this thing of saying curiosity just pushes our border to explore more and to allows for co-creation, for collaboration instead of competition. And to trust the other ones that are willing to collaborate and not necessarily kind of like get a step in front of us. What is that? What is your take on that one, Alan? Because I think you worked with a lot of companies developing their strategy, and when you're talking about strategy, you're talking about competition.
Well, of course, when you say I've worked with them on the strategy, all I do is facilitate them. I often say to them, if you hear me saying something, if you want me to write a report and you put it in your strategy, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not the expert, you are. So it's really important to, in a sense, keep a distance from your engagement, because, I don't know, clients trust me. And when they say, well, what do you think we should do? And I'll go, well, I'm going to tell you, but I wouldn't do it if I was you. You know, maintaining a position as the expert, not in their business, but the expert on how to help them make progress is really important. The session I was doing this morning was an interesting challenge. Again, it's a not-for-profit in the community, arts community. And it's mostly built in local low-income areas. We have a few of them in Toronto, and it's pretty ethnic, Black, some Indigenous, etc. And in the session this morning, which was with funders, they were talking about all kinds of amazing stuff I didn't know about that's going on in a cultural sense in these communities. So rather than me judging whether or not what they were saying made sense, I would say, tell me a bit more about that. Oh, how would you see that working, etc., etc., to get them to expand, because a fair amount of what they were talking was what I call rhetorical. They want you to believe what they believe by telling you that this is the way it is. So instead of reacting to it, I'm saying that's interesting. How would you see that? How would you see making that happen to get them to do some more thinking? Curiosity. Incidentally, I've been doing this for years. Somehow clients like giving me jobs where there's an angry management and an angry union, and their factory's going to get shut down if they don't stop fighting each other, and they'll move production to China, all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of the work I do, people who are in conflict. And needless to say, solution focus goes a long way to shifting that away from them.
Well, you definitely raised our curiosity to say, and how does that work with a solution focused lens of saying, how do you diffuse the conflict?
Well, many stories. That factory I was talking about is German owned. And in fact, I was contracted out of Germany for the work. And it's a couple hundred miles from Toronto. And the Germans hadn't yet said it to them openly, but they knew it, which is if they didn't figure out how to work together, the factory would be closed and production would go to China, which wouldn't be to the advantage of the Germans because the quality was much better from Canada at that time. Anyway, finally I get in front of one of the union leaders, and he's a very angry guy. And yet he seems like he's got a good set of social skills. He's just not using them. And the factory manager was a woman. And so he was saying things about her that were personal. And I said, I need you to stop talking that way. And without going any further on that, I said to him, I'm from Glasgow. It's an industrial town. And this is an industrial town. So if I moved from Glasgow to, name of the town is called Sarnia, what would I like about it? And I took him away from his anger into something he was pretty good at. Oh, well, we can sail on the lake, we can fish, we can go across the US border and get, because it was right on the border, get cheap beer, blah, blah, blah. I went on about it. And I said, And if I moved here with my wife and children, what would I like about it? And he said, oh, we've got some of the best schools for technology, particularly factory technology. In fact, we hire quite a lot of students out of that local college. I said, really? And I asked him a few more questions. Then finally I said to him, if I came to work at this factory, what would I like about it? And he said, and he looked at me because he was a smart guy. He just had lost his whatever. He said, okay, Alan, I get it. He said to me, how can I help you? So what I was doing was helping him diffuse his anger by understanding that he had to sell the benefits of living there, education, what was good about the factory. And I mean, he didn't for the rest of the 2 days, he was like this, arms crossed, but he knew that he had to let go of his former position.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's breaking down hostility. And he wasn't being hostile to me, he was being hostile to the management. And that was a few years ago. If he'd said that recently, he would get picked up by the police probably. And does that help with what you were asking?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that example, you know, it just shows how you can use simple questions and simple curiosity and being just open to who's the person in front of me. What is it exactly that's, you know, if it's about what's bothering him, who's the person in front of me? What are his desires? What are the things that he enjoys, and what are the things that he values? And from there, it can only be a human connection. And that
right. And if I could build on that, the human connection, you know, I got empathy from him because I said I came many years ago from Glasgow, it's an industrial town, and blah blah blah. Another time with a broadcaster, a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, English and French, radio and television, digital now, etc., etc. I was asking the team some questions, and one of the staffers, really senior person, was just like blocking everything. So I said to her, well, hang on a second. And this is, I think it's kind of interesting. I personalized it just like I did with the union leader. I said, when I was a kid, I was born in Glasgow, but I lived in Africa for quite a while. And I remember we only had one radio station, certainly no television, and it was the BBC. And so when we eventually moved back to Britain, I was well connected to the idea of the BBC. Then I came to Canada and I found the CBC. And it's an amazing organization. And I'm not being patronizing, I'm just trying to get them to listen. And I said, I understand you sell quite a lot of your program in other countries, Australia, New Zealand, etc. They went, yeah. I said, how do you do that? And the woman who had been objecting up until this point, because she was a producer, she produced one of their best radio programs, been on the air for years. She jumps up and says, well, we do this, 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 and this. At which point I said, so do you think we could use any of that in this project? And again, personalizing it, connecting, empathy, all that stuff.
And building on past resources.
Yeah.
Because
she didn't stop being angry. She took me on a couple more times, but the third time she did it, she apologized to me. And she didn't have to apologize. I just do my job. But it doesn't happen instantly. However, if you set out on that path, you're consistent.
Yeah, true. You make a more than just a human connection, but you also bring out the best out of them.
And something that's relevant to them.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm just going to pick up on what you said now, something that is relevant for them, because I know for sure that Marco has a tool, and I'm just more than a tool, but it's something that helps you summarize what's relevant for you. Because if I think about your agenda, Marco, that's what it does. It forces you to summarize what is relevant for me.
Yeah, the agenda was born because always I buy agenda by shop, but I never found the agenda that I really need. And I optimized the agenda in a way to adjust, but it was always wrong for me because of the work. So I start to produce in the dot, like this is dot, and I produce for myself. And I asked to myself, okay, supposing you have your perfect agenda, how was it? And I tried to find, but it didn't find. So I produced for myself. And then I discovered that this way didn't work because every year I need to produce one. So because solution focus create collaboration, I asked to my web designer, web master, and I asked, okay, suppose I create a format. can you create me a PDF? I say, yes, of course. So I can print and okay, so I create, and then it finish in Amazon because we publish, and this is in Amazon. And this is just an agenda with a space for manage time with is an hour time. And all the agenda is planning in solution focused way. For example, is a part to analyze the past. And when I ask past about my friends, okay, how it worked your last year? They start to say, oh shit. You always start with what didn't work. But if we start with what not work, the next year will be a little bit better, but it's not so far from the worst. So the next one is a space where you can build in the future. Suppose the future will be great. What will be different? And you start to imagine, to collect ideas, and to design in a way, as Stefan we will share after, by small paint what we want. And that make us like an orientation that, yes, I want to arrive there. And then I plan my here. I just print the numbers, not the days. So it works every year because I change the number, I change the days, so it works every year. And we discover later what it does mean for company. And then I have a months, the planning for months that have rigid days, but not the numbers. So it works for every month. And then is the week. And the week is planned in a very solution-focused way. I use weekly planning. Then I put my goals. The call I need to do, because for me, call people is better than writing email. And then there is solution-focused part. The scaling box. So in a scale between 0 and 10 about this program, where I am, and what is the urgent things I need to do, the to-do list connect with what I do. And there's also a free box that now I use for Zoom, because from the COVID I use for Zoom. But the best point is the miracle question. Asking every day, every week, every month, suppose this week work, what will be different? What change? At the first time I didn't write it, but then I start to write, but always I see and always start thinking in what could be the difference that I want to realize. If it happen, what will be different for me? I ask for my body and I feel in my body. So this agenda is not a box where I put the to-do list on what to do. It's like a friend that work with you to help you to have a dream and to manage a dream. And so you can manage it in every day you do in solution-focused way, and every day you work with this. But the second part is more interesting. We sell this in Amazon and by Amazon self-publishing. And then I was in Budapest in the conference and I showed the agenda. And Natasha Aviat, she's French, she liked and said, oh, there is also a free book, but this is in English. I would have in French. I haven't, I don't speak so much in French, so I don't have. And she said, can I translate? I say, wow, yeah, yes, you can translate, of course, but how we can exchange. And I have an idea, and I create the solution-focused agenda ambassador. The ambassador are the solution-focused practitioner, expert in solution-focused, but different from Italian. So French, Czechoslovakia, Polish, now we have in Russian. And so I have an agenda. I have the ebook in French, German, English, Czechoslovakian, Polish, Russian, and next time also in Greek and Japanese. Very proud of it. So what does it mean? It does mean that when we collaborate, the ambassador will teach the agenda, because I also offer a training about this in their language, and the money is them. If people buy the agenda is the money of the agenda is me, and they go on, and the idea of solution focus go on the world. And for company, it's still interesting because we can manage and we can personalize the agenda for the company. And this agenda work every year, so they don't put in the rubbish the agendas that they don't use in 2020 because they can use in 2021 or 22, and it's interesting for the company. But also work in a sense of belonging, because we have the same box that we use in the same way, and we write. Another things that I learned from Solution Focus, in a scale between 0 and 10, if I use the scale just talking, it's different than if I use the scale touching. All of us use the mobile. It's different if I put in the agenda of mobile and I touch and I cancel. If I do something and with the pencil, I cancel. When I use the hands, for me, I work in this way. I put more in the reality. I just read what I do. I just help my mind to visualize, and I can see the difference. And
it's a really interesting point, because it's consistency, and like a lot of SF happens in spoken language and in conversations, and it just shows the diversity of SF, that it can also be applied in a written format, because some people translate through the ear, and some people really need, like you said, Marco, a pen to make it really stick.
Exactly. So if you want to read the ebooks, it's completely free. You don't need to put your email. It's just that's free. And you download. You go in solutionfocusagenda.com and you download it. But what I want to share with you is not the agenda, that is my tools, but the concept that is behind. Looking to your future, not something that will happen, but something that you can build. Imagine what beautiful it is, and sharing and create co-collaboration. You can create like a business model like me with ambassador and so on and so on. And so is my product to help my life to make it better. So my question is, what you could do to implement your tools and to create the tools that you really change your reality because you use. I make that because I use in this way. And so this is my approach to the developing of tools. And I don't use many words, so we have time to share, and I will very rapidly. If you have a question, then you ask me.
Thank you, Marco. You know what I take out of what you were saying? There are two things. And one is you build up on a resource that you had. And that means you had yourself, your mind to structure things, and you had a need. And that need was better satisfied by putting to use those resources that you had. By saying, what do I need? So I need an agenda that goes like this and does that, and this is what it will give me. So how would it be if I would have that in hand? And then you start creating based on what you need and based on what you have as resources. And again, like Alan was saying, build up on the resources that they had, with the example with the lady. So when you asked her, what is it that you are doing good here, she knew exactly what was it that helped them sell products or their services, their broadcasting in so many regions, because she knew exactly what were their resources at the basis. And the other thing that I take from what you were introducing as concepts behind that agenda is exactly this idea of prototyping that Stephanie was mentioning also earlier, because you went through different ways of doing it and trying to figure it out what's the best approach to a product that would give me what I need using the resources that I have.
Exactly. And there's a little part, I'm Italian. And we live, we don't realize it sometimes, but we live constantly in monument, hearts, and so on and so on. So we have in the blood the beauty. So when you develop something, asking to yourself also to manifest the beauty in a moment. And so what I did after is create the cover, and I create the cover also following this sense of beauty and helpness, because this is the small post-it. Also, the concept of beauty, it's another concept that we can use. Imagine Apple. In a sense, the beauty was inside and simple. when I analyze the book of Alan, what I like is it's simple. Simple is another form of beauty. So when we develop approach, also the simplicity and the beauty is part of it.
Mm. Mm. I think that's exactly one point that Stephanie would gladly pick up on. Have the
beauty.
The beauty, but I think mostly the simplicity, because I think that's one of the concepts that is ingrained in design thinking. Am I wrong?
You are absolutely right. Simplicity is design thinking. It's all about small steps. I prepared a couple of PowerPoint slides just to show how I got to the whole use of SF in design thinking, if that's interesting for everybody. No?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So maybe some of you are familiar with design thinking, and it's a 6-step process. And at this point, I just wanted to show you what it looks like generally. It doesn't really look close to SF. Empathize, maybe some things, define a problem, right? Ideate, prototype, and then test it, and then do it all over again. And here, let me tell you a story. I first got into design thinking around this time that I was finishing with my first SF course. And I thought, wow, an amazing intersection of 2 worlds that I knew nothing about before. So design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation, and it draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibility of technology, and the requirements for business success. So that's like one of the most famous statements of design thinking. And here, so it's a traditional, it's a problem-solving approach. And so I started taking a look at it, and traditional problem solving is about planning, avoiding failure, analysis, a lot of presentations, intermittent, and thinking. And then design thinking is a lot like SF, and all of a sudden these little light bulbs, which are on the right-hand side of the screen, just started popping up in my head. Trial and error, learning from, well, failure, learning through at least trying, testing, small experiments, small steps, customer relationships. So these relationships that are so important in SF, and something that Alan and Marco talked about was consistency. It's continuous. You keep having to keep going and just do it, those small steps of SF. So when you create a prototype, you're building something that's a minimal feature that you'd like to test, and you're showing it to someone, you're exposing yourself to failure, letting them look at it, and then you try again. And I saw this and I was like, okay. And then this was a very new representation of what design thinking is. What is, what if, what wows, and what works. And I'm a visual person. And this is how I first came to putting the 2 of them together, because what if, miracle question, what is, platform, what wows, wow, sparkling moments, and what's works. It's like the focus on what's working. And it was away from this trial by error, put something in the market and fail. And this slide, the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, it really fits well together. And so I'm a visual person, a little bit like Marco. And I sat down and I took all those bubbles away, and I thought, how can I fit SF into this whole design thinking process? So I took away all like the technical stuff, and I said, well, let's do it. Of course, there's the team building and the check-in and the affirm in the beginning, right? Like every part of team building. And then when we understand, it's the first phase of design thinking, when you understand what the problem's all about, yeah, that's the platform. I turn problems into user needs. I use all that kind of terminology because who wants to talk about problems all the time? And instead of asking only what's wrong, what doesn't go right in my customer interviews, in my user interviews, I turned it around and tried to use at least some questions that are, so is it working anytime? What are some signs that it's working? And you get different answers. Answers that sometimes give you ideas already in this process. Here I put in what if, brainstorming could be a theoretical future perfect. The miracle question could help teams come up with a what if. Prototyping is small steps, testing, and then I'll show you in a later slide what wows. Instead of focusing on what didn't work during this test, I changed one of the templates in design thinking to use SF words, at least in part of it. And that's really kind of one of the nice things about design thinking. Everybody uses these templates that are all over, and I just changed one up, and it was that easy to implement SF into a workshop that I was giving. So what failed turned into what worked. Sparkling moments, right? Scaling questions. Where are we? Where are you? And of course, the traditional SF and the team building, the checkout, the affirm, and the resource gossip. And so the idea was, how do you bring in SF into your own industry? And for me, it was really seeing something on paper, a graphic that told me a story of possibilities and focusing on what's working. And here it is. That's what I did. Okay. And then I just wanted to show you when we do prototyping, which happens all the time, and feedbacking, I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. When you're finished, this is the feedback grid that everybody uses: likes, criticism, questions, and ideas. And okay, and then after that, the team says, well, where do we want to go back? Where don't we understand enough? What's gone wrong? Let's find out where we are in the process. And I turned it around to what works, what's wowing the customer so we can do more of it, and then questions and ideas like before. So you don't have to put SF everywhere, but really find out where it works in your own environment and add it in just those points. And at the end, I had what would the next small step look like in progress? And it made a real difference in the positive emotional state of this team, this diverse team that I was working with. Especially the first time that you're involved in a design thinking process, you test something and it usually doesn't work. How do you make people feel better? How do you help them see that actually it was a great experiment? And it's just by putting those two quadrants up at the top and really making them exciting and positive. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's a beautiful example. It's a practical example of saying, this is what I learned, or this is what I tried, this is what I've experienced, this is what I have knowledge on. How do I take that? And I just add it on top of a different, I don't know, a different pot, mix it one more time, and there's something else coming out. Yeah.
I mean, I have all this stuff around all the time, and I just think about it and use it. And I picked up Marco's agenda, right? And I thought to myself, what a nice idea it would be to have a design thinking team all keep journals and all really cement the process. And, where are we today? Where are we yesterday? And it becomes this like when you go on vacation, you have a book of pictures that reminds you of the happy times. Maybe that becomes like a takeaway document.
Can I build on what Stephanie talked about, in the sense that I've noticed over the years, Agile, and I'm not particularly up to date on design thinking, but there's so many of these models we use now. And what I noticed after a while was, I remember the purposeful, forget what it was, but I noticed it was a bit prescriptive. And so what I did was take the prescription out and put the user in charge of the questions. And let me just show you quickly. This is a screen I'll be putting up later on. Where is it? Here. The outfit I liked, I've been following them for years, is ProSci. They're a training business in the States for change management. And this first paragraph, it says, all change comes from personal transition. Fantastic. Best if the executive management leadership, executives are engaged, leadership, sponsorship, supervisor and staff level tools, individual needs like awareness, to build awareness, knowledge, blah, blah, blah. And I said, my goodness, why don't we just layer solution focus into that? So there's how I put it. I just want to endorse that, again, Stephanie's thinking, take existing models. You don't have to reinvent them. You can make them better. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can just get those models a step further, right? Just move one step on the scaling and say, how can we reuse what we have? Because that's another point of solution focus, right? Is just work with what you get, what you have, and doesn't mean that we have to start everything from scratch. And see how can we turn something into an even more powerful tool.
Yep.
Marco, I think you wanted to say something.
About what? Because I was so curious about, I was touched from the diagram of Stephanie, and was amazing what changed when really we used the solution focus lens to add this framework in the other reality. Mm. And for me, it's really clear and of course brilliant. But I think to the rigid design thinker that was problem solved, organized, how much is big is this jump in this form of, in this change of paradigm? Because it's really a change of paradigm that make the difference. And
the word problem still comes up. I mean, it comes up all the time. It's about making it okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, problem happen, but how we manage the problem is the difference. We are focused on the drama and we start on the grumble, or we look to how, and we asking about, okay, suppose we resolve it, what will be different? And so this change of paradigm is maybe for us that we are here and we are close to the solution focused approach is clear. But what I see outside, that is not so easy to do this jump. And so this is the beauty that we put in the world, this concept that can change really the reality of people.
And it comes through the conversational aspect often, that it's that willingness to take a chance. How do we adopt this model? It looks different than what we've done before. And Alan's right, that comes from those SF conversations.
And the level of connecting, or the other way around, at the need to connect at the human level. Because that's what we were talking earlier with Alan, saying, so I looked at that person like a person, not necessarily just through the conflict and how do I solve a conflict, but I looked at what is it that you are trying to achieve based on that, or what is it that you're trying to do with saying, I'm upset now, but so let's have a conversation on it, let's have a talk on it. I would be curious also to say, I really enjoyed listening to the stories from three of you, but I would really, really curious to see if there's any stories from the room, if there's anyone that wants to share an example of where you say, well, I took something and I sparkled a bit of solution focused on top, and this is what came up. If anyone wants to, you can put your mics on by yourselves, I think. I don't think I have to do anything. And you can just share something, or if you feel more comfortable, you can share in the chat.
Or if you don't have a case, maybe just an idea that was coming now, listen us to talk and say, oh, I really appreciate it, I try to do in this.
I'm happy to go.
Thank you, Kat.
So I work in the NHS, and we use a lot of questionnaires to kind of measure symptoms. And we've introduced solution-focused therapy into the team that I work in, and we found it quite hard to find measures that are kind of positively worded or solution-focused, and not just a list of problems and symptoms, and kind of measures that more match what our patients are saying they care about. And when we did find kind of more solution-focused measures, a lot of them aren't validated, but we kind of found some measures that that sort of, rather than being like an extra chore for people to fill out, actually they start the conversation in as we mean to go on, and so just kind of having finding things that are questionnaires that could be focused around what people care about and what they're kind of not just a symptom list, I guess, has been really helpful as a way of sort of starting the conversation as we need to go on.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for sharing. It's a beautiful example of saying, like you said, what is for the person that is behind that questionnaire.
Catherine, was that with patients or with members of your team?
Also, it's with patients, but the members of the team then kind of ask the kind of they build on what, because often we refer back to the questionnaires and say, oh, you said anxiety is a real problem for you, and we still have all these questionnaires that ask about problems. They are important for the people we work with, but it was a way of starting to kind of find out, well, so you say that sometimes you feel connected to other people. What would it be like to feel more connected to other people, or is that what matters?
Yeah, I used a solution-focused process to design a small change project planning process for African university administrators. So we used Osri's systems chart to locate where they were in the organization. And then we went on to describe the particular strengths of the middle. And so we started off using a basic quality process. But instead of asking, well, what needs to be fixed? We started off, well, what are your strengths? And you know, where in this quality review are you really scoring high? Now, can you use that as a platform for a small change project so that you can begin to navigate your way around your institution? Because most of the delegates in this program, they have been trained in human resource management or they had MBAs. And although they studied in a university, they were never introduced to the peculiarities of a university as an institution. So we spent the mornings talking about, you know, the university's mission of teaching, learning, and research, and in the afternoons we basically led them through a research design progress, moving from strengths to future perfect, resources, who's going to be, you know, and included in that, who could be your critical friend, who did you need to collaborate with, and then the small steps. And then they were awarded the certificate once they had completed the small steps. Unfortunately, when we completed this program, all the administrators went back to their places and everyone went on strike for 3 months. And so we had a few good projects come back, but they were few. And so I think the sponsoring organization didn't take it any further, but it was really one of the best things that I've done in my career. But we used solution focus to put together the planning process.
I'm more than sure that also those small drops made an impact later on, because those people went with that SF mindset and went asking the same kind of questions, which helped somebody else turn their questions around. So it can only be just making small changes, small progress, small pieces of hope. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
Can I jump in on that one? In a case where working with pharmaceutical people, there was kind of this atmosphere afterwards amongst the sales team. Well, it didn't go very well. And yeah, okay. Next meeting, just invite me. And I literally stood at one end of the room and they were all sitting there. And they're my client and then his boss were looking down. I said to him, so what's better and different since we last worked together? Not much. Really? I kept pressing. Finally, somebody said, well, we did get the scientists together with the senior doctors. So, that's interesting. At the last meeting, you said it wasn't going to be possible. How did you manage to do that? And the dam burst. they had done an awful lot with it. Just the culture of the place was not used to noticing progress, and it helped them by going in and ask these questions, but also shift that culture away from presuming it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we did 3-month reviews, and we did monthly reviews. The projects were meant to last 3 months, so we did 3 monthly reviews, and it was kind of done by email, and the object was to track their progress and then to go back and comment on what was working for them. And at the end of the day, they were making those, they were working with that solution focused mindset and making progress. And we got news of, you know, breakthroughs, we got news of promotions. So it was a very, very good, powerful process.
And because sometimes what the client sets you out to do turns out to not be exactly the issue they want to reframe. You know, the process is emergent. And what that team had worried about was they were working long hours and not making a lot of progress. Once we got past that, and they agreed to a whole bunch of stuff they would do, they did continue with the long hours issue. But they went off and did a lot of stuff. And once you reminded them of that, it begins to supplant what they think is the problem. You know, we have to work too much.
Beautiful example. Beautiful example and beautiful reminder of that. That's also, it's more than just observing, but it's also giving kind of like a moment to think about it. I've seen also Marco's hand going up earlier, and I want to go back to you and ask you if there was something that you wanted to add.
Marcus?
That was you. I mean, Marco, you had your hand up earlier, and I wanted to see if you wanted to say something.
Your microphone is closed.
Sorry, no, I don't want something to add.
Okay, wonderful. Anyone else wants to share another?
Hi, Paul. Matthew?
Yeah. Hi, Paul. Exactly.
Hi. So it's an idea that I've been exploring, but no results yet because it's not been carried out. So maybe a little bit of context. I work in a non-profit agency. So one of the key things is volunteer management and really working together with volunteers. So I think one of the issues that we're facing is how do we get the entire organization on board certain frameworks and processes. I think that's been a challenge that my department has been facing for like the past 2.5 years, and there's a lot of negativity. And I think just now Alan was saying something about when he started having regular reviews of what's been working. I think that really like sparked a thought that I think a lot of times, especially I think in the Singapore culture, the Asian culture, we tend to see, we don't really celebrate small wins. So if, let's say in a test, you improved from, let's say 60% to 65%, but it's below the expectation of, let's say 80%, they would never say that, oh, well done, you improved by 5%, but they always put you down. And I think we are very problem focused, like what is wrong, and because this is what's wrong, your whole idea is not going to work. And I think it really got me thinking that perhaps I think this is one area that SF could help us in implementing or improving our volunteer management processes. Yeah.
That's so nice. That's so nice because we see this develop. You know, you see it on your face and you see it on you going like, that might be actually something. Actually something.
Yeah. It's really building more and more of the ideas that I could possibly explore once we really roll out this SF perspective into my organization.
Well,
Yeah.
I would say you can ask questions at any point. Look how beautiful stories and how many stories everyone can share. And this is how you can just take from there whatever you need and whatever is useful for you and your situation, and just go back and edit and turn a bit the wheel and then make it work different. Alan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, relative to Matthew was talking about at the beginning, you get a lot of this problem focus, and the project is emergent. What they often say they want at the beginning, it turns out not to be what you work on. It's not radically different, but it's a shift. What I've discovered over the years is building into the proposals, because I'm an independent, is the follow-through section. And lots of clients go, yeah, sure. And after they've done the work, they move on to something else. And I say to them, the follow-through section, and I kind of push them to do it, maybe a month later. And that's all you ask. What's different and better since we last talked? And wait. So it overcomes the suspicion they had that lingered from the beginning, where they weren't, really clear on what they wanted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that links beautifully with what Matthew was saying, because at the end of the day, you don't get stuck in just looking. So I moved from 80 to 85 due to this project, so it's just 5%. But it says, okay, then wait a bit longer and see what happens also in the future and what's the impact later on. Like we were talking with Brian and saying, there's definitely these waves going on more deeper and touching more people than we just see on the spot.
And they're influenced by outside perspectives that weren't considered during your planning work or whatever. And they return after you've had this successful meeting to slow it down. Hence, go back and ask them what worked. Revives the motivation, the understanding. It's all sitting there. They've done more than they realize.
Yeah. And to add something about what Alan said, it's not only what I want, it's also what I feel, not I think, what I feel that I deserve.
Yeah.
In this part, I need to become in contact with my resources, because more I realize that I have resources, more I have a sense of I deserve. And in this little part, what Alan said, the client said, nothing happened, because my mind is focusing about what's wrong. But when I celebrate every small percent that Matthew said, as me and Cristina said in the workshop before, about celebrate and say thank you, also to myself when I do something, 1%, okay, it's 1%, but it's a difference. And when we start to this, we recognize more resources, we feel more deserved, and we do that also with the team, also with the client, also with the citizen. And we change the reality in a small part, but they change as a global system.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I'm looking at the clock now, and there's we have 1 minute left, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I know that we have on the schedule after this one another networking session for the entire Europe part of the conference.
Have something to share is that, so you have our website. So if you want to write to Alan, to Stephanie, to me, or to Cristina, you can make a screenshot. You will have our website, and so you can ask more if you have questions, and so on and so on. So 3, 2, 1, we come back together.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Cristina, for organizing this.
Thank you very much.
I hope that it was a tiny step in looking at how we can take other experiences and figuring out how we can add them, as I said, a bit of sparkle in something else and learn from each other.